I told you that the first part of ethics syllabus is all the theoretical concepts related to ethics, morals, values, thinkers, philosophers, Indian ethics, emotional intelligence, attitude, social influence, persuasion, then ethics in private sector, ethics in IR, and ethics in public and private relationships. This is the first part of the ethics syllabus. Now we are going to start with the second part: governance, good governance, civil services, corruption, etc. Okay? Third part क्या था? What was the third part? Self introspection. कर रहे हैं आप लोग? You are doing self introspection. No? I have told you the method to do self introspection. What method did I tell you? Value wise I told you. For each of the list of foundational values, create a list of examples from your own life. जो हमने अभी foundational values discuss किया, honesty, integrity, probity. You have to document a list of examples from your own life. What have you done in your own life to show to the examiner that you are an honest person? Small examples: compassion, empathy, fairness, impartiality, leadership, courage of conviction. ठीक है? ये सारे values के लिए you have to create a list of examples from your own life. That is self introspection only. That is how you have to do self introspection. You have to think and you have to document a list of examples for each of those values, so that if any question comes on that particular value, you can write your own examples. This is what I told you. In case you are not able to find your own examples, then examples from the lives of other thinkers, reformers, administrators. So many examples that we have discussed. That is how you have to do self introspection. Apart from this, some general things. Okay, about your emotions. Various emotions such as happiness, sadness, anger management again is very important. What makes you happy, what makes you sad, what makes you angry, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what inspires you, what motivates you, what do you want in life, what does patriotism mean to you. All these things we have discussed. This is how you have to do self introspection. और कोई तरीका नहीं है. There is no other way. If you are waiting, I will tell you some golden principle. I already told you how to do it. Okay? So start documenting a list of examples. Okay? So this is the second part, second component of the ethics syllabus that we are going to start: governance, good governance, civil services. Governance. Now, I think again governance we have discussed briefly. What is governance? How do we define what is the difference between government and governance? In the orientation we have discussed.
Government is not the only.
Yeah. So governance is a collective problem-solving activity. Okay. By governance, we mean network governance. Okay. So the process of networking is implicit in the concept of governance. Okay. So government is just one of the players in governance. Okay. Apart from government, who are the other players? So when we talk of governance, it includes government, it includes private sector or the markets, it includes civil society, NGOs, citizens groups, etc., media, and international institutions. International institutions such as World Bank, IMF, WTO, etc. Okay. All these are stakeholders in the governance process. Okay. So governance or network governance is a collective problem-solving activity wherein all these stakeholders, all these entities, they cooperate and collaborate with each other to achieve the objectives of inclusive and sustainable development. Okay. And government is just one of the players in governance. So governance can exist even without government. Okay, presence of government is not necessary. Okay. Now, what is good governance? Okay, governance जो ठीक है, good governance क्या है? ये good लगाकर what are we trying to prove or what are we trying to highlight? What is the difference between governance and good governance?
Efficiency.
Good governance means efficiency and governance is a value-free concept. Good governance is an adjectival expression. Okay, we are adding an adjective, good, before governance. Okay, so it denotes certain value connotation. Okay, on the other hand, governance क्या है? It's a value-free concept. Okay, so governance, I told you, can be analyzed at 4 levels. There are 4 dimensions of governance. क्या 4 dimensions है? Yeah. So now these 4 concepts, these are value free. Leadership can be good, it can be bad. And the laws can be good, bad. Institutions can be good, bad. Systems, processes can be good or bad. But when we say good governance, it denotes a certain value connotation. There is a certain value assumption. Now, good governance as a term, it was coined by World Bank. Okay, in 1992. And good governance emerged in the context of malgovernance. Okay, in the context of malgovernance in African and Latin American countries and Asian countries also. Okay, so you remember international aid conditionality and Washington Consensus? Washington Consensus I have discussed. As part of international aid conditionality, we had discussed that there was consensus between the US government and Bretton Woods institutions that the economies, like the developing countries, need to open up their economies so that they could utilize the loan and aid efficiently. Okay. So, as part of international aid conditionality, the developing countries were forced to introduce economic reforms. Okay, through liberalization, and they were forced to introduce governance reforms through the idea of or through the concept of good governance. I understand. The context is the same, the background is the same, international aid conditionality. As part of international aid conditionality, developing countries were forced to implement economic reforms through the concept of Washington Consensus. And they were forced to implement governance reforms through the concept of good governance. Okay, again the argument was that developing countries are not able to utilize the loan and aid because of malgovernance in these countries. Okay. And especially like this concept emerged in the context of African countries, because a lot of loan and aid was being given to a number of African countries, and because of malgovernance in these countries, all the loan and aid was being basically appropriated by the dictators there. African in most of the countries, there were dictatorships in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and because of malgovernance, all that money was being basically misused. Okay, so in the context of malgovernance in African countries, Latin American countries, etc., ये जो term है, this term good governance was coined by World Bank. World Bank said that what developing countries need is good governance reforms in order to utilize the loan and aid effectively. Okay, and World Bank came out with 8 features of good governance. World Bank came out with 8 features of good governance. Okay. So when we talk of good governance, what are the 8 features? As per World Bank, efficiency and effectiveness. Equity and inclusiveness. Transparency. Accountability. Responsiveness. Participation. consensus orientation. Lastly, rule of law. Okay, these are the, like in the original document which World Bank had written, where the concept of good governance was coined. Initially, World Bank said that these are the 8 components, 8 features of good governance. Okay, efficiency and effectiveness. You understand the difference between efficiency and effectiveness? What is the difference?
Efficiency is on tangible things. Effectiveness is concentrate on overall outcomes.
Yeah. Efficiency in terms of input-output ratio, effectiveness in terms of achievement of outcomes, objectives. Transparency, accountability, responsiveness, okay, participation, consensus orientation, rule of law. Okay. Now you need to understand that this entire concept of good governance is a very ambiguous concept. It's a very multi-dimensional concept. World Bank defined it in a particular way, but in general, anything positive can be associated with good governance. है ना, कोई भी reform होता है, you might be reading, you might be hearing that it's a good governance reform. है ना, तो कुछ भी अच्छा हो रहा है, it can be considered to be good governance. Okay. So apart from these features, there are few other features of good governance. Okay. For example, a liberal democratic framework with free and fair elections. Okay. Apart from these features, what are the other features of good governance? A liberal democratic framework with free and fair elections. Respect for human rights. Respect for pluralism and diversity. Freedom of speech and expression and civil liberties. Respect for human rights, respect for pluralism and diversity, freedom of speech and expression and civil liberties. Decentralization. Decentralization. Probity or ethics in public life. Probity in public life or ethics in public life, etc. Okay. So essentially, anything positive, okay, anything which has universal acceptance, it can be part of good governance reforms. Okay. So don't think that was any art component of it. Now, next is importance of good governance. Okay. Importance of good governance. Now, I have told you how, like, the importance of any concept, any phenomenon can be analyzed. In which way? How do we analyze the importance of any concept, any phenomenon? No. That is one way of looking at it, but here, intrinsic importance and instrumental importance. Every concept, any phenomenon will have its intrinsic importance as well as instrumental importance. So, intrinsic importance. Intrinsic importance means it is an end in itself. Okay? It has its own intrinsic value. So each of the components of good governance, they have their own intrinsic value. Okay. For example, take any component. Participation. Take participation. For example, participation is one of the components of good governance. Now, what is the intrinsic importance of participation? Participation means participation of people in governance, in development. So participation of people in development and governance, it is an end in itself, because a democracy is based on popular sovereignty. People are sovereign. Okay. Participation of people in a democracy, it's a conscience raising exercise whereby people become shapers of their own destiny. It is part of the concept of social citizenship. Okay. So, in a democracy, people should participate in development and governance. Period. Okay. That is intrinsically important. Okay. Participation of people has its instrumental importance also. That is, it is a means to achieve something else. It helps in achievement of something else. For example, participation of people is important for achieving better public policy outcomes. One of the reasons why our public policies have failed after independence is because of lack of participation of people. Whenever policies are being formulated or whenever they are being implemented, people do not participate. Okay. So, if you go to any village or in India in general, one of the problems that we face is assets that are created, they are not maintained properly. For example, say, किसी गांव में in any village, a tube well has been installed. Now, if that tube well stops functioning, okay, people do not care. Okay, they wait that somebody from the government will come, they will repair the tube well, and then it will again, they will again start using it. So maintenance of assets, something that has been created, something that has been installed, the operation and maintenance of those assets is a huge problem. It is a huge, it has been a huge public policy challenge for us. Okay. And why is this an issue? Why this takes place? Why this happens? Why assets that are created, they are not maintained by the people?
I think that there is not enough force.
They think that it is not?
Enough force.
Why they think like that? Why they think that it does not belong to
Created by government authority.
Yeah, created by government authorities, but when that tube well was being installed, nobody asked them whether they need a tube well or not. Whether this tube well should be installed here or it should be installed somewhere else. Are you understanding? So because people did not participate, okay, when the tube well was being installed, so there is lack of ownership. Are you understanding? They do not, as you told that, they do not think that it's their asset. They think that it's government has come, they have installed it, and therefore it is their responsibility. Okay. Now this has been a huge problem in our public policy. There is lack of ownership on part of the people. People do not participate. Okay. Similarly, people's participation is needed for better developmental outcomes. Okay. In India, given our diversity and given our size, participation of people at the local level is not just a moral imperative, it is a practical governance necessity. We cannot have one size fit all strategy. We cannot have central government or like earlier what used to happen? Central plan, there was a planning commission, it used to decide policies in a top down manner at the central level in Delhi, sitting in Delhi. And that policy used to be implemented in all states without people's participation. So again, given our size and our diversity, we cannot have one size fit all strategy. कि एक policy बनाई और वो सारे states में implement कर दिया, because each state, not just each state, every district, every block, every village has its own set of problems. So that's why people need to participate in identifying those problems at the local level, and they need to give their input. So for better public policy outcomes, for better developmental outcomes, for checking corruption, people's participation is important for checking corruption. Okay, for example, how can people check corruption, or how does people's participation help in checking corruption? Whistleblowing, social audit. I told you about social audit? No? Yeah. Then we were discussing Aruna Roy and MPSS. She was the pioneer of social audit in India. Okay, and she used to conduct public hearings, gems and wise, where people themselves, they used to audit public works and highlight irregularities and highlight instances of corruption. Okay, so social audit is an example wherein people's participation can be used for checking corruption, highlighting corruption. So people's participation has its intrinsic importance, it has its instrumental importance. Similarly, for each of the components you can do a similar analysis. Again, in the examination you cannot go for all the components, just take one component and explain it. The importance of good governance can be analyzed at two levels, intrinsic and instrumental level. For example, participation. The participation का you explain. Clear? Now, what have been India's achievements in the field of governance? अगर ऐसा कोई क्वेश्चन आता है, question comes, what do you think India's achievements have been in the field of governance or good governance since independence? किस field में, in which field India has done reasonably well?
Equity and inclusiveness.
India has done well.
Rules-based policy.
See, basically in the field of political governance, we have done reasonably well. Okay. So broadly, there are different realms of governance: political, social, economic. Okay. So as compared to socio-economic governance, socio-economic development, in the political field, in the political governance part, we have done reasonably well. So after Second World War, okay, a number of countries were decolonized; they became independent. And India was one of the few countries which adopted democracy. And we are one of the few countries who have been able to sustain our democracy, with the exception of 2 years of emergency. Okay, except those 2 years, we have had democracy throughout our independent history. We have had free and fair elections. Our election commission and our election process is one of the most credible in the world. You know, it's like our elections take place in a free and fair manner, and there is peaceful transfer of power. Otherwise, you compare, again, it's a huge achievement for us. We might not realize it, we might not appreciate it because we take this for granted. Please think that अरे ये तो होना ही है, इसमें क्या elections होना है, कोई नई government आएगी. Okay, it is not so common in many of the other countries which became independent after Second World War. Southeast Asian, you compare ourselves with all the Southeast Asian countries, like Thailand, Philippines, Singapore, Malaysia, you know, or South Asian countries, Maldives, Pakistan, Bangladesh, okay, Myanmar, many of the African countries, okay, they have had dictatorships, military rule. वहाँ पर elections होते भी हैं, most of those elections are rigged, they are manipulated. है ना, कोई जीता इलेक्शन उसको मार दिया, है ना, so there is no rule of law. Okay, so again it's in the field of political governance, like we have had universal adult franchise since independence. Now again it's a huge achievement, we might not appreciate it, but in a number of developed countries they did not have universal adult franchise. So I think I gave you the example of Switzerland. As late as 1971, they did not have universal adult franchise for women. Okay, so these things we take for granted, but in the field of political governance, we have done quite well as compared to our contemporaries. But in the field of socio-economic governance, in the field of socio-economic development, although we have made progress, but a lot more needs to be done. So in terms of per capita income, in terms of our literacy rate, in terms of our life expectancy and other human development indicators, we have made progress as compared to what we were at the time of independence. For example, what was our life expectancy at the time of independence? 32 years. Okay, now it is 68, 69 years. So, life expectancy, literacy rate, per capita income, okay, all these things have improved, but again, a lot more needs to be done, as is reflected by our ranking in different developmental indicators. HDI India का क्या ranking है? Human Development Index, what is India's ranking? Okay, it has been around 130 for the past 2 decades. Since the early 1990s, it has been sometimes 130 goes to 131, 132, it comes down to 127, 128, but उसी range में it has been there. Okay. Similarly, in all the developmental indices, चाहे वो human development, whether it's HDI or it's multidimensional poverty index, okay, whether it is gender empowerment index, all these developmental indicators, we are in the bottom of the index. Basically, it shows that in the socio-economic developmental field, we have not done that well. Although we have done, like we have made progress, but it could have been much better. Okay, so as Ambedkar had said, that day we were discussing, that political democracy without socio-economic democracy is futile. It is not going to be sustainable. Okay, so politically we have done well, but जब तक socio-economic, inclusive and sustainable development नहीं होगा, till the time inclusive and sustainable development takes place, just political democracy, just political governance is not going to be adequate. Okay? So if any question comes on India's achievements in the field of governance, highlight the political governance part. Socio-economic governance, again, don't be pessimistic and don't just criticize. Say that, okay, we have made progress, although the pace of progress could have been much more. Okay? So it should be optimistic. Always the tone of your answer should be optimistic. We are on the right direction. If certain reforms are implemented, we could do much better. Clear? Okay. Now, when we talk of good governance reforms or ethics in governance, okay? When we talk of good governance reforms or ethics in governance, it includes reforms in different institutions of governance. And I think in the orientation I had discussed this. See, when we talk of good governance reforms, it includes reforms in different institutions of governance. So, the most important institution in a parliamentary democracy is political party. And from the political party comes the elections. फिर elections होगा और electoral reforms. Okay. Then parliamentary or legislative reforms. Okay. Then reforms in executive. Reforms in judiciary. Reforms in civil services. Reforms in local governance. And finally, reforms in regulatory body. When we talk about good governance reforms or ethics in governance, it includes reforms in all these institutions, beginning with reforms in political parties, because political parties provide the foundation in a democracy. All the legislators, all the ministers come from political parties. Okay. Then electoral reforms, reforms in elections. Then reforms in parliament, legislative reforms, reforms in executive. Okay. What is executive reforms? Yeah, reforms in the functioning of the government. Okay. Then civil services reforms. Okay, or judiciary reforms. Reforms in judiciary. So these are the three organs of the state: legislature, executive, judiciary. Okay. Then reforms in civil services. Now civil services technically it is part of the executive only, but we discuss it separately. Okay, because it's a very important.
Public service bureaucracy, everything is same. In public service, excluding the
Yeah, public service has two parts: the political part and the bureaucratic or the administrative part. The administrative part is the civil service. Okay. Then reforms in local governance. Local governance means reforms in Panchayati Raj institutions and urban local bodies. 73rd and 74th Amendment that has taken place. What are the issues with 73rd and 74th Amendment? What reforms need to be undertaken? And finally, reforms in regulatory bodies. Again, in the last 2 decades, the regulatory bodies have emerged as a very important institution of governance. Okay. So, out of all these institutions, our special focus would be on civil services, because civil services we have to study in detail. Okay. From the examination point of view also, civil services is something that is very important because it's part of the syllabus, it's part of syllabus of paper 4 as well as paper 2, and in general also, apart from examination also, because you all are civil services aspirant, so you should know what is the nature of civil services in India, what are the strengths and weaknesses, okay, what are the issues in the functioning of civil services, and what reforms need to be undertaken to strengthen our civil services. Okay. So what we'll do, we will first start with, out of all these good governance reforms, we'll first start with civil services. Okay. We will discuss civil services in detail. Then we will discuss other governance reforms. Now see, many of these reforms are more relevant for your paper 2. For example, local governance reforms, it is more important for your paper 2 rather than in ethics. In ethics till now, no direct question has come. Okay, although questions are asked from political parties, parliament, judiciary, etc. But local governance या regulatory body पर अभी तक directly questions have not been asked. Okay, so these have to be covered as part of the preparation of paper 2. Regulatory bodies is part of your paper 2 preparation. Local governance is part of your paper 2 preparation. Okay. So I will try to cover in ethics as much as is possible. Okay. The rest my notes would be there. So in my notes, all these reforms would be covered in detail. Okay. But technically you have to read these things as part of paper 2. Generally these are not taught as part of ethics. But because it's part of governance, I thought like teaching this would give you a holistic perspective. Okay. So we will discuss civil services in detail. Again, civil services is also something which is important for paper 2. And paper 2 में आपका portion है governance reforms, role of civil services in a democracy, issues related to transparency, accountability, etc. Okay. So this part is actually, it will cover the relevant governance portion of both paper 2 as well as paper 4. पेपर 2 में आपके पास एक एडिशनल चीज पढ़ना होगा ई गवर्नेंस व्हिच इज नॉट देयर इन पेपर 4. So let us start with civil services. Have I told you the second ARC reports which are to be read? So this entire governance portion mostly I will be covering from government reports, second ARC reports, Upsc Commission reports and few other government reports. Now second ARC reports are very important for the governance portion because there is no book on governance. Okay. So as far as reference is concerned, there are few second ARC reports. Now second ARC you know, Second Administrative Reforms Commission. Now second ARC has come up with multiple reports, I think around 15 to 20 reports around. And each of those reports are very bulky. Many of those reports are 300 pages, 400 pages, etc. So, most of the important reports I will be covering in the class. Okay, but for your reference, if you want to read, okay, the important reports are personal administration, ethics in governance, citizen-centric administration. Okay, these three are the most important reports as far as the governance part is concerned. Okay, personal administration, this is the 9th report. Ethics in governance is the 4th report. Citizen-centric administration is there. Apart from these, there are few other reports also. For example, there is a separate report on local governance. Then there is a separate report on public order and police reforms. There is a separate report on disaster management. Okay. So those things have to be covered as part of your, like for example, paper 3 में आपको disaster management के बारे में पढ़ना है, internal security के बारे में पढ़ना है. So the report on public order would help you in internal security issues. Report on disaster management will help you in disaster management topic. Okay. Local governance का there is a separate report. Okay. And all these reports are available online. Second ARC का website है. All those reports are available there.
Personal administration.
Personal, what does personal mean? That is personal. P-E-R-S-O-N-A-L. This is personnel. L-L-E-L. Personnel means people who work, administration, establishment. So personal issues क्या होते हैं? What does personal administration include? Issues related to recruitment, promotions, performance evaluation. Okay. ये सारे issues जो हैं training and capacity building. कि personnel को कैसे manage करना है? How to manage the employees personnel. Okay. Now again, in my whatever I am going to teach you, most of the recommendations, most of the content will come from these reports only. Okay. But again, if you want to read, these are the reports that you can read. These are very useful for paper 2 as well as paper 2 for essay also. Okay. So it will help you in developing a perspective. Okay. So civil services. The first thing that we need to understand is the nature of civil services in India. What kind of civil services we have. Okay. So when was civil services as an institution introduced? By see, civil services had come into existence even during war and Hastings. After East India Company became a political power, they needed a cadre of people to help them in their to help them in consolidating rule over the country. Okay, so earlier, like during the British times, we had covenanted and uncovenanted civil services. Okay, and during British times, what we had was colonial bureaucracy, or rather ruling bureaucracy. What does ruling bureaucracy mean? The civil servants or bureaucrats were extremely powerful, and they were not accountable to the elected representatives. Okay. So at that time we had like provincial legislative assemblies, central legislature, which comprised of elected representatives. However, civil servants were not accountable to them. They were directly accountable to the British Crown through the Secretary of the State or the Viceroy. Okay. So that's why they were ruling bureaucracy. Okay. Now after independence, when the debates of Constituent Assembly were taking place, okay, a lot of debate took place as to whether to continue with the civil services or not. Because civil services were considered to be an instrument of exploitation. Like the British used 3 institutions to subjugate the Indian masses, to control the Indian masses. Okay, the army, the police and the civil services. So civil services was considered to be a symbol of British exploitation, symbol of British oppression. So after independence, debates were taking place whether we should continue with ICS or not. At that time it was known as Indian Civil Services. And most of our leaders were against the continuation of the civil services as an institution, except one. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. He said that civil services is just an instrument. Okay, during British times they served the British and they did what they were asked to do. There is no reason why in independent India they cannot serve us. Okay. So ultimately, because of the persuasiveness of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, we continued with civil services. Okay. What kind of civil services we adopted after independence? We adopted a permanent, career-based and generalist civil services. Okay. Permanent and career-based means in India, civil services is taken as an occupation. There is permanency of tenure. So a recruitment takes place through an open competition by a constitutional body called UPSC. Merit-based recruitment होता है. Elaborate training program is there. Elaborate training and capacity building programs are there. Okay. Systematic performance management system is there. Okay. And all the important positions at the center, state and sub-state level are reserved for civil servants. ठीक है? तो ये ना तो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में कहा गया है, neither it is written in the constitution nor it is part of any law that all the say secretaries would be civil servants or IAS officers or group A officers. ठीक है? It's not written anywhere. Or it's not written anywhere that all the PSU heads would be civil servants. But in practice, all the important positions at different levels of government, they have been reserved for civil servants. So there is bureaucratic monopoly in India. So this is what permanent and career-based civil services mean. Plus we have a generalist civil service. Generalist का क्या मतलब है? कि
responsibility.
So first of all, to enter the civil service, you do not need any particular qualification. Secondly, even after entering the civil services, your job profile does not match your expertise. And what is your educational background, what is your previous job experience, etc. These do not matter. So one day, like today, I am posted in finance ministry. Tomorrow I will be posted in health ministry. Day after agriculture. ठीक है, उसके बाद urban development. So there is no sort of matching of your competency with your job profile. Generalist, they are not specialists. Clear? So we have a permanent career-based and generalist civil service. Plus we have a Bavarian civil service. So after independence we adopted a Bavarian. So I told you Bavarian means as prescribed by Max Weber. Okay. So Weber came out with his bureaucratic theory. Max Weber was a sociologist. In fact, he was a multidisciplinary scholar. And in modern times he came out with his Max Weber's bureaucratic theory. So Weber said that bureaucracy is a form of organization, an organization which exhibits certain principles. Okay, so what are the principles or what are the features of a bureaucratic organization? We have discussed. क्या-क्या features होते हैं bureaucratic organization के? Impersonal order, value, neutrality and rationality, hierarchy, discipline, centralization of authority, exercise of authority on the basis of domination and command, rules and regulations, written communication. Okay. Now please understand that bureaucracy does not mean civil services. Generally क्या कहते हैं हम लोग? कि bureaucrats or bureaucracy. Bureaucracy generally mean like in common language. When we say bureaucracy, we mean government or civil servants. Okay, it is not like that. Bureaucracy is a form of organization. Any organization, any institution that will exhibit these characteristics will be a bureaucratic organization. Okay, because civil services exhibit these characteristics, therefore it is considered to be a bureaucratic form of organization. Even a private sector organization, if it will have those characteristics, it will be a bureaucratic organization. Are you understanding? So bureaucracy is a form of organization. Bureaucracy does not mean civil services. Okay, but across the world, civil services or government exhibit these functions, exhibit these features. That's why generally civil services or government has become synonymous with bureaucracy. Okay, even apart from civil services, military also exhibits these characteristics. Armed forces, it is also a bureaucratic organization. Church, Catholic Church, also exhibits these characteristics: hierarchy, discipline, etc. It is also a bureaucratic organization. Okay. Next, so this is broadly the nature of civil services in India. We have a permanent career-based and generalist civil service. Okay, and we have a Weberian civil service characterized by those principles. Okay, next, strengths of our civil services or positives of our civil services. What are the strengths, what are the positives of our civil service, or what are the achievements of our civil service? First, civil services have contributed positively to the functioning of our democratic polity, pluralistic society, and growing economy. It has performed regulatory functions such as upholding the rule of law and unity and integrity of the country. It has performed regulatory functions such as upholding the rule of law and maintaining the unity and integrity of the country, of a country such as India. Maintaining the unity and integrity of a country such as India, which is prone to various kinds of conflicts. That civil services have contributed positively to the functioning of our democratic polity, growing economy and pluralistic society. Especially in regulatory functions, they have done very well. Broadly, government के जो functions होते हैं, the functions of government can be divided into two categories: developmental functions and regulatory functions. Okay. Regulatory functions include functions such as maintenance of law and order, revenue collection, disaster management, conducting elections. Okay, so civil services have performed these regulatory functions very well. Although developmental functions उतना अच्छे से perform नहीं कर पाए, that we will see later. Okay, next. Civil services have contributed not just in policy implementation, but in policy formulation and monitoring and evaluation. Okay, so in India, civil services perform in the same point. In India, civil services perform quasi-legislative and quasi-judicial functions as well. quasi-legislative and quasi-judicial functions as well. Okay, so traditionally civil servants or civil services has been basically in charge of implementation of policies. Okay, they perform executive functions, that is implementation of policies. Okay, but in practice, in India, they have been performing policy formulation functions also. So in India, apart from executive functions, civil servants perform quasi-legislative and quasi-judicial functions also. For example, how do they perform quasi-legislative function?
Policy.
How do they make, like, one is through policy making, that is the draft of different policies and laws are actually made by civil servants and then they are finally approved by the minister. Okay, that is one way. Another way is through delegated legislation. You understand delegated or subordinate legislation? No? You haven't read polity? You didn't read subordinate legislation?
Parliament doesn't have enough time for
Yeah.
moreover the quick decision making.
Yeah, so who make the rules? By executive who? By executive who exactly?
So the political executive, political executives will frame the
delegated authority make the policy perspective the administrative.
Yeah, essentially when we say executive, when we say that parliament by subordinate legislation, delegated legislation, we mean that the parliament delegates the responsibility of making rules under a parent law. The parliament passes a parent law and the relevant rules and regulations are to be framed by the executive.
They frame the skeletons, the relation feedback administrative.
Yeah. So the parliament frames the skeleton, not the executive, not the political executive. The parliament frames the parent law. Take NREGA, for example, NREGA is a parent law. The parliament passes it, and then what exactly is to be done under NREGA? What are the activities that are to be conducted under NREGA? What should be the labor material ratio, etc. All these are framed by the executive. Okay, through rules and regulations. And by executive, we essentially mean civil services, regulatory bodies, etc., which are manned by civil servants. Okay. So delegated legislation ke through the civil services perform quasi-legislative functions. And what are the examples of quasi-judicial functions? Yes, DM performs quasi-judicial functions. Regulatory bodies perform quasi-judicial functions. All these regulatory bodies, SEBI, TRAI, Competition Commission of India, okay, they perform quasi-judicial functions, and these bodies are manned by civil servants. Okay. Similarly, tribunals. Okay. CAT, SAT, Central Administrative Tribunals, State Administrative Tribunals, and other tribunals. Okay. They have judicial members and they also have representation from civil servants. Like there are also civil servants. Okay. So in India, civil services perform not just executive functions, not just implementation functions, but also quasi-legislative and quasi-judicial functions. Finance Commission as a quasi-judicial body. Is it?
No, sir, it is just a recommendation.
As per the article, I mean,
Which article?
Article 280 itself.
So it is advisory in nature.
But Article 280 does not say that it's a quasi-judicial.
It doesn't say, but no, it is a body. It's a quasi-judicial body.
Where is it?
It
What is the justification that he is giving?
is not given Mr.
I don't think it's a quasi-judicial. I haven't read Lakshmikant, so I don't know what Lakshmikant has written. So I don't think it's a quasi-judicial.
There is a question placed for this person.
With BSc?
I mean, not specifically related to this.
What was the question?
Based on what is a quasi-judicial body and what are the various bodies. Is a question. But not
Finance Commission would not be part of quasi-judicial.
It was given that, so I had the doubt. So how can it be a quasi-judicial?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Finance Commission is an advisory body, as he said, and it is not necessarily on part of the government to accept the recommendation of Finance Commission. Nothing is written. In fact, I think 10th या 11th Finance Commission जो था आई थिंक 95 से 2000 वाला जो फाइनेंस कमीशन था, some of its recommendations were not accepted. Okay, it is a convention. It is a convention to accept the recommendations of finance commission. See, a quasi-judicial body is somebody which has the powers to sort of redress grievances, redress disputes, या contempt powers अगर है आपके पास. Okay, वो quasi-judicial bodies हैं. Finance commission does not have those powers.
So it's not, I mean, it doesn't have any sort of power, but can it be a quasi-judicial body was the government?
It just basically prepares a report and gives recommendations to the government. This is how basically taxes and other sources of revenue can be shared between the central and the state governments. Basically, whatever its terms of reference is. I don't know why in Lakshmikant it's written. I don't know. I don't think it's possible. We'll stop here. Tomorrow can you come for the class? Are you all here? Test देने तो आना ही है. Test would be of 1 hour only. ठीक है? Because only till what we are like test will cover portion till what we have covered till yesterday. Okay, till ethics in IR. Till ethics in IR test would cover. Okay, and it is a relatively simple test. I have deliberately kept it simple. Basically, test questions would be on the basis of whatever we have discussed in the class. So, I have deliberately do not put like difficult questions. So, just focus on whatever has been read, just revise it. Okay, you will be able to answer the questions. Okay, so test would be of 1 hour. Okay, because it is covering only a part of the syllabus. Test you can come in the morning, 10 a.m. Okay, give the test for 1 hour and then go back. I'll then check the papers and then we can have a discussion later. Class I am planning, I mean, it's not confirmed. Okay, I will confirm it tomorrow morning. Okay, they will send you messages. If the class is to take place, it will take place in second half. What will be the timing of the class? If at all it happens, they will let you know. They will let you know tomorrow morning. They will message you tomorrow. Okay. तो टेस्ट देने आप लोग सुबह 10 बजे हम at tomorrow 10 o'clock in the morning give the test, then go. Second half class we will inform you in the morning. If the class is to take place, message will be given, phone calls, message या phone call.
How much questions will you
It's a small test. Don't think too much. How many questions? How much marks? It's just for your self-assessment whether you have understood whatever is being taught or not. It will be a very simple test. So just revise whatever has been taught in the class. That should be, you should be comfortable. If you have listened to what I have said, if you have made notes, then absolutely. Okay, so tomorrow's class I will let you know tomorrow morning.
I discussed in that. I was actually in the previous batch. I joined almost after 10 classes to complete. I joined almost the classes to ending, then I joined. Like, this was for 2 weeks, right? I joined still there are like 5 more days.